you don't feel like you're falling behind. That's the problem. You're functioning. You're handling things. Life looks fine from the outside, but there's a quiet gap you don't talk about. You're not catching up. You're just keeping pace. And the reason that gap keeps growing isn't something dramatic. It isn't one big mistake. It's a small habit you repeat almost every morning before you've made a single real decision. You reach for your phone, not because you're addicted, because it feels harmless. Just a quick check. Just staying informed. Just seeing what you missed. But from that moment on, the day isn't yours anymore. You spend the rest of it responding to messages, to noise, to urgency that isn't actually yours. By the time you get to the things that matter, your sharpest focus is already gone. So you tell yourself the same lie you told yourself yesterday. I'll do it later. Later tonight. Later this week. Later when you're not so tired. But later keeps moving. And here's the part most people never connect. It's not that you lack discipline. It's that you give your best energy away first. You spend your sharpest attention on things that don't move your life forward, and your leftovers on the things that could. So every day feels full, but nothing feels finished. And that's how people fall behind without ever feeling like they failed. Because this habit doesn't feel destructive. It feels normal, and it's quietly deciding every morning whether you catch up or fall further behind. Here's what's really going on. That habit, the one that starts your day for you, isn't about the phone. It's about relief. The moment you check it, something subtle happens in your brain. You avoid effort. You avoid uncertainty. You avoid choosing. And instead, you get a small hit of clarity without commitment. Notifications tell you what matters right now. Messages give you something to respond to. Feeds give you stimulation without responsibility. Your brain loves that because choosing your own priorities requires friction, and friction feels uncomfortable, especially first thing in the morning. So your brain defaults to the easiest path, reacting instead of directing. Here's the mechanism most people miss. Every time you start your day reacting, you train your mind to associate focus with effort and distraction with relief. That association compounds. Soon, the moment you think about doing something important, your brain looks for an exit. Check something. Scroll something. Respond to something. Not because you're weak, but because you've trained yourself that relief comes first. And here's the deeper cost. When you give your best attention away early, you don't just lose time. You lose authority over your day. You stop deciding what matters. You let urgency decide for you. By noon, you're already mentally depleted. By evening, you're negotiating. By night, you're promising tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow starts the same way, because the first thing you do sets the mode your brain stays in. If the first thing you do is consume, your brain stays in consumption mode. If the first thing you do is respond, your brain stays reactive. And once that mode is set, everything else feels harder than it should. That's why catching up never happens. You're always starting from behind, not in time, but in mental state. And the most frustrating part is you don't notice it happening because it feels productive. It feels connected. It feels responsible. Until you realize you've spent your sharpest hours making other people's priorities easier and your own harder. That's the truth. Not laziness, not lack of ambition, just a habit that quietly teaches your brain who gets your best energy and who doesn't. The reason this habit survives isn't because it works, it's because it's protected. Protected by stories we've been told. So often they sound like common sense. One of the biggest myths is this: being connected is the same as being responsible. We've been trained to believe that if we don't check messages right away, if we don't stay up to date, if we don't respond quickly, we're falling behind. So checking your phone first thing in the morning feels mature. It feels like you're on top of things. But notice what that story does. It reframes reacting as leadership. It turns availability into virtue. And suddenly, giving your best attention away first doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like adulthood. Another myth is sneakier. I just need to stay informed. News, trends, updates. You tell yourself you're gathering context. But most of what you consume in those early moments has zero impact on the quality of your life. It just fills your head before you've chosen what deserves to be there. Information without intention isn't power, it's noise. But because noise feels active, you confuse it with progress. Then there's the productivity myth. If I clear messages and email first, I'll be efficient. In reality, you're doing the opposite. You're teaching your brain that shallow attention is the default, that quick responses matter more than deep work. And once your mind learns that pattern, sustained focus feels unnatural. Not difficult, unnatural. So when it's time to work on something meaningful, your mind resists. Not because you don't care, but because you've trained it to expect constant stimulation. Then there's the most comforting myth of all. I don't have time in the morning. That one feels airtight. Your mornings are rushed. People need you. Responsibilities are real. But here's the truth most people avoid. If something matters, it shows up early. Not because mornings are magical, but because they're uncontested. Later in the day, your attention is rented out. Early in the day, it's still yours. And the myth that mornings are optional keeps you from seeing what you're actually giving away. Finally, there's the cultural story that distraction is normal. Everyone scrolls, everyone checks, everyone feels behind. So instead of questioning the habit, you normalize it. You tell yourself, this is just how life works now. But normal doesn't mean harmless. Normal just means common. And common habits create common outcomes. That's why so many people feel busy, overwhelmed, and behind while doing the exact same thing every morning. These myths don't just protect the habit, they make it invisible. They make you feel justified while it quietly drains your edge. And until you challenge the stories, the habit keeps deciding your trajectory. Not loudly, not dramatically, just consistently. Here's where this habit stops being harmless. Not today, not tomorrow, over time, because nothing bad happens when you give away your morning once, or twice, or even for a year. You still function. You still get by. You still tell yourself you're doing your best. That's why it's dangerous. Now stretch the pattern forward. 3 years from now, your days still start the same way. Your attention still belongs to whatever reaches you first. Your priorities still wait until later. When you're tired, you've learned more, consumed more, reacted faster, but you haven't built much, and the cost isn't obvious at first. You don't wake up miserable. You don't feel like a failure. You just feel slightly behind. All the time. Behind on goals. Behind on clarity. Behind on the version of yourself you thought you'd become. So you compensate. You optimize small things. You reorganize. You plan resets. But the foundation never changes. 5 years pass like this, not in chaos, in repetition. And by then, something subtle shifts inside you. You no longer fully believe your own intentions. When you think about starting something meaningful, a quiet voice responds immediately. You've said that before. So you lower the bar. You aim for goals that don't demand deep focus. You choose plans that fit into leftover time. You stop asking yourself for your best hours, not because you're incapable, but because disappointment is exhausting. This is the real long-term cost, not missed opportunities. Diminished self-trust. Because when you repeatedly give your best energy away first, you teach yourself, day after day, that what matters to you comes second. And that lesson doesn't stay isolated. It shows up in your confidence, in your decisiveness, in how seriously you take your own goals. You start managing yourself instead of trusting yourself. You hesitate more. You commit less clearly. You stay busy, but rarely fulfilled. And the hardest part is you can't point to a single moment where it all went wrong. There's no dramatic mistake to fix, just a long series of ordinary mornings that quietly shaped your trajectory. This habit doesn't ruin lives, it stalls them. And stalling feels safe until you realize what it costs. Because the people who seem ahead of you aren't doing more in total. They're protecting their sharpest hours. They're not more motivated. They're not more disciplined. They're more deliberate, early, and that one difference compounds. Here's the good news. You don't need to become a new person. You don't need to wake up at 4 a.m. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You've just been spending your best attention at the wrong time. The habit isn't scrolling itself, it's leading with reaction instead of intention. Once you see that, everything changes, because this isn't about fighting distraction all day. It's about how the day begins. The first thing you do doesn't just fill time. It sets the mode your brain stays in. When the day starts with consumption, your brain stays in consumption mode. When it starts with reaction, your brain stays reactive. And once that mode is set, focus feels heavier than it should. So the shift is simple, but it's not small. You don't need more hours. You need a protected one. Not because mornings are magical, but because they're uncontested. Later in the day, your attention is rented out. Early in the day, it still belongs to you. When you claim even a small window, 30 minutes, where nothing else gets access to you, something changes. You stop asking your brain to fight distractions. You simply don't invite them in yet. This isn't perfection. It's order. Order creates calm. Calm creates clarity. Clarity makes follow-through easier. And once the order is set, you don't spend the rest of the day trying to catch up. You're already ahead. Not because you worked harder, because you worked first. And here's what makes this deeper than productivity. It's identity. Because when you start the day by choosing your priority before anything else chooses you, you reinforce one message. What matters to me gets my best energy. That message compounds. Confidence returns, not as hype, but as certainty. Because you're no longer negotiating all day. You've already decided who the day belongs to. That's the quiet habit that decides everything. Not your talent, not your ambition, your order. What comes first? What gets your sharpest energy? What you stop giving away automatically? The next year is coming either way. So is the one after that. The only real question is whether you'll keep starting your days in reaction mode, or whether you'll claim your best energy first. Not for productivity, not for performance, for self-respect. Because catching up isn't about speed, it's about direction. And direction gets decided early, long before anyone is watching. Now that you see it, you get to choose what it decides for you.